All right, listen up, because this one's gonna blow your mind. You think being in the world's biggest boy band means you get to do whatever you want? Think again. What if I told you that the very things BTS members loved the most, their personal hobbies, their comfort foods, their guilty pleasures, were actually shut down by the man who built them, Bang Si-hyuk himself? Why would a genius producer ban something as harmless as a member's favorite snack? What kind of rule could possibly stop an idol from doing the one thing that made him feel like himself? And here's the real kicker. Which member had to give up something so deeply personal that it almost broke him emotionally? Buckle up, Army, because today we're counting down the top 7 reasons why BTS's favorite things were strictly, absolutely no questions asked, banned by Bang PD. And trust me, number 1 is something no one saw coming. Number 7. Jin, the gaming obsession that almost cost him everything. You know what's wild? Out of all 7 members of BTS, there's one guy who could literally sit in front of a computer screen for hours, and I mean hours, without blinking, without eating, without even realizing the sun already went down and came back up again. And that guy? Kim Sik-jin, worldwide handsome, the eldest Hyuk of BTS, the man who could charm millions with a single dad joke, but behind closed doors, he had one addiction that drove Bang Si-hyuk absolutely insane. We're talking about gaming, not casual, oh, I play a little on weekends gaming. No, no, no. We're talking about full-blown, hardcore, I forgot I have a concert tomorrow level gaming. Jin was obsessed with video games. MapleStory, Overwatch, League of Legends, Super Mario, you name it, he played it. And not just played it, he was good at it, like scary good. The kind of good where professional gamers would look at his stats and go, wait, this guy is an idol? Jin himself admitted multiple times on live broadcasts and variety shows that gaming was his number 1 source of happiness. Not singing, not acting, not even eating. Gaming. He once said during a V-Live session that after a long, exhausting day of rehearsals, recordings, and schedules, the only thing that kept him sane was coming back to the dorm, firing up his PC, and diving into a virtual world where he wasn't Jin from BTS, but just another player trying to level up. And honestly, that's relatable. That's deeply, deeply human. But here's where things took a sharp turn. During BTS's trainee days and early debut period, we're talking 2012 to 2014, Big Hit Entertainment was not the billion-dollar empire it is today. Back then, they were a small, struggling company barely surviving in an industry dominated by the big 3, SM, YG, and JYP. Bang Si-hyuk had poured almost everything he had into this one group, this one dream. Every single hour of practice, every vocal lesson, every choreography session, it all mattered. There was zero room for wasted time. And that's exactly what Bang PD saw when he discovered just how deep Jin's gaming habit went. According to multiple behind-the-scenes accounts and interviews from the members themselves, Jin would stay up until 3, 4, sometimes 5 in the morning playing games. He'd show up to practice the next day looking like a zombie, eyes red, reflexes slow, voice tired. And in a group where synchronized choreography is literally life or death for your career, that was a massive problem. Bang Si-hyuk didn't just get annoyed, he got genuinely concerned. See, this is what people don't understand about Bang PB. The man wasn't just a CEO sitting in an office counting money. He was a hands-on producer who personally monitored each member's progress. He knew their strengths, their weaknesses, and most importantly, their habits. And when he noticed that Jin's vocal performance was dipping, that his dance timing was slightly off, that his energy during fan events was lower than usual, he traced it all back to one thing: those late-night gaming sessions. So what did he do? He implemented a strict curfew on gaming. Not a suggestion, not a friendly reminder, a rule. Jin was told point blank that gaming after midnight was no longer allowed during comeback preparation periods, and during intense rehearsal phases, gaming was essentially banned altogether. Now imagine being told that the one thing that brings you peace, the one escape from the insane pressure of being an idol in South Korea, a country where the entertainment industry chews people up and spits them out without a second thought. Imagine being told you can't do that anymore. Jin later talked about this in subtle ways during interviews, always with that signature smile of his, always making it sound like a joke. "Oh, Bang PD Nim took away my games," he'd say, laughing. But if you really listened, if you paid attention to the way he said it, you could tell it wasn't entirely funny to him. It was a sacrifice, a real one. And here's the thing that makes this even more fascinating. It worked. After the gaming restrictions were put in place, Jin's improvement was noticeable. His vocal stability during live performances got sharper, his dance precision improved, his overall energy on stage went up. Bang Si-hyuk's gamble, pun absolutely intended, paid off, but it came at a cost. Jin had to give up a piece of himself, a piece of his identity, to become the idol that millions would eventually fall in love with. And that's the part of the K-pop industry that nobody likes to talk about. Behind every perfect performance, behind every flawless music video, behind every award show trophy, there's a sacrifice, something personal, something painful, something that an artist had to let go of so that the machine could keep running. For Jin, it was his controller, his keyboard, his escape. And you know what's bittersweet? Even after BTS became the biggest group on the planet, even after the Grammys nominations and the UN speeches and the Billboard records, Jin still had to negotiate his gaming time with management. The man sold out stadiums with 80,000 people, and he still couldn't play MapleStory whenever he wanted. If that doesn't tell you everything about how strict Bang Si-hyuk's vision was, I don't know what will. So the next time you see Jin cracking jokes on camera, looking like he doesn't have a care in the world, just remember that smile was built on discipline, on sacrifice, on a man who loved gaming more than almost anything, but loved his team, his dream, and his army even more.
Number 6. Jungkook, the adrenaline addiction that terrified everyone around him. Okay, let's talk about the golden Maknae. Jungkook, the guy who can sing, dance, rap, paint, film videos, do photography, play sports like a professional athlete, and probably learn brain surgery in a weekend if he felt like it. This man is literally good at everything he touches, and that's not fan exaggeration, that's just a documented fact at this point. But here's the thing about someone who's good at everything. They want to try everything. And for Jungkook, that meant extreme sports. We're talking bungee jumping, skydiving, skateboarding, surfing, rock climbing, snowboarding, anything that got his heart rate above 180 and made normal people's palms sweat just watching. Jungkook didn't just casually enjoy these things, he was drawn to them, like a moth to a flame, like a man who spent his entire adolescence locked inside practice rooms and recording studios, and the moment he tasted freedom, real, physical, wind-in-your-face freedom, he couldn't get enough. And honestly, can you blame him? Think about this for a second. Jungkook moved to Seoul when he was 15 years old. 15. He left his family in Busan, left his friends, left everything familiar, and walked into a trainee system that basically said, "Your life belongs to us now." From that moment on, his days were scheduled down to the minute. Wake up, vocal training, dance practice, language lessons, recording sessions, fitness training, sleep, repeat. For years. So when Jungkook discovered extreme sports, when he felt that rush of jumping off a platform with nothing but a bungee cord between him and the ground, it wasn't just fun, it was liberation. It was the one moment where he wasn't following a choreography, wasn't hitting a note on cue, wasn't performing for anyone. He was just alive, raw, free. BTS's own variety content captured glimpses of this. Remember that iconic Bon Voyage moment when the members went bungee jumping in New Zealand? While some members were literally shaking with fear, Jungkook was grinning, eyes wide, zero hesitation. He jumped like he'd been doing it his whole life. And during Run BTS episodes, anytime there was a physical challenge, climbing, racing, anything remotely dangerous, Jungkook was the first one to volunteer. Always, without exception. But here's where Bang Si-hyuk drew a very thick, very firm line. See, in the K-pop industry, an idol's body is not just their own. It sounds harsh, and honestly, it is harsh, but it's the reality. When you're part of a group like BTS, your physical condition directly affects concert schedules, world tours, music video shoots, award show performances, and brand endorsement deals worth millions of dollars. One twisted ankle from a skateboard fall could delay an entire comeback. One fractured wrist from rock climbing could cancel a sold-out stadium tour. And we're not talking about hypotheticals here. The K-pop industry has seen this happen. Multiple idols across different groups have suffered career-altering injuries from off-schedule activities. Hyuk knew this. He'd been in the music industry since the late 90s, working alongside Park Jin-young at JYP Entertainment before founding Big Hit. He'd seen talented artists derailed by preventable injuries, and he was not about to let that happen to his most versatile member. So, the ban came down. And it wasn't subtle. Jungkook was explicitly restricted from participating in extreme sports and high-risk physical activities, especially during comeback periods and tour preparations. No bungee jumping, no skydiving, no skateboarding on concrete without supervision. No, let me just try this real quick moments that could end with a trip to the emergency room. And here's what made it even harder. He didn't fight it with anger. He accepted it with this quiet, almost sad understanding. In interviews, when asked about his hobbies, you could see the shift over the years. Early Jungkook would excitedly list all these adventurous activities. Later Jungkook would pause, smile softly, and say things like, "I want to try many things, but I have to be careful." That pause, that smile, that "I have to be careful," those words carry so much weight when you understand the context. This is a young man in his early 20s, the age when most people are backpacking through mountains, surfing in Bali, snowboarding in the Alps, and he's sitting in a studio saying he has to be careful because millions of people depend on him, because a world tour depends on him, because the dream depends on him. There were moments, though, where Jungkook's rebellion streak peeked through. ARMY noticed him posting clips of himself working out in unconventional ways, handstands on edges, flips in practice rooms, intense boxing sessions that looked way more aggressive than standard idol fitness routines. It was as if he was channeling all that suppressed adrenaline into whatever physical outlet he could find within the boundaries Bang PD had set. And that's both admirable and heartbreaking at the same time. The members themselves acknowledged this part of Jungkook's personality. Namjoon once mentioned in a behind-the-scenes moment that Jungkook's fearlessness was one of his greatest strengths, but also the thing that worried the Hungs the most. Jin joked, and that way Jin jokes where you know it's half serious, that managing Jungkook's adventurous side was like trying to keep a golden retriever inside a house when the door is wide open. And Bang Hyuk, he understood something profound. He understood that crushing Jungkook's adventurous spirit entirely would break something essential in him. That fire, that fearlessness, that I can do anything energy that made him the Golden Magni in the first place. So, the band wasn't about killing Jungkook's passion, it was about redirecting it. Channel that energy into performances, into stage presence, into being the kind of performer who jumps and flips and dances with such intensity that 80,000 people in a stadium lose their minds. And guess what? It worked. Jungkook's stage performances became legendary precisely because all that suppressed adrenaline had to go somewhere. Every powerful dance move, every gravity-defying jump during concerts, every moment where he pushed his body to the absolute limit on stage, that was the extreme sport he was allowed to do. The stage became his bungee jump, the concert became a skydive, the performance became his freedom. So the next time you watch Jungkook perform and think, how does a human being move like that? Now you know. That's not just talent. That's years of bottled-up adrenaline, years of being told no to the things he loved, all exploding out in the only arena where he was allowed to be completely, utterly, dangerously.
Number 5. BTS V, the artistic soul whose creative identity was put in chains. If there's one member of BTS who was born to be different, it's Kim Taehyung, V. The man with the deep, velvety baritone voice that sounds like melted chocolate poured over vintage jazz records. The guy who shows up to airports dressed like he just walked out of a 1970s French art film. Beret tilted, oversized coat flowing, accessories that no one else on the planet could pull off, but somehow look absolutely iconic on him. Taehyung isn't just a singer. He isn't just an idol. He's an artist in the purest, most untamed sense of the word. And that right there is exactly what got him into trouble with Bang Hyuk. See, Taehyung's favorite thing in this world, more than performing, more than being on camera, maybe even more than his beloved Yentan, was his personal creative expression through fashion and individual style. This man didn't just wear clothes, he curated looks. He told stories through fabric. He mixed high-end Gucci pieces with random thrift store finds he picked up in back alleys of Seoul, and somehow created outfits that made professional fashion editors question their entire careers. His love for fashion wasn't surface-level vanity. It was deeply tied to who he was. Growing up in Daegu, Taehyung wasn't like the other kids. He was the quiet, artistic one, the one who saw the world a little differently, the one who would rather visit an art gallery than a gaming cafe, the one who listened to jazz and classical music while his peers were blasting K-pop and hip-hop. From a very young age, the way he dressed was his language. It was how he communicated his inner world to the outer world without having to say a single word. And when he entered Big Hit Entertainment as a trainee, he carried that identity with him like a shield. But here's the brutal truth about the K-pop industry, and this is something that fans often struggle to accept. In a group, there is no I, there is only we. And Bang Hyuk understood this principle better than almost anyone in the business. When BTS was being built, and I use the word built intentionally because that's exactly what it was, a construction project of 7 individual identities merged into one cohesive brand. Every detail was controlled. The music, the choreography, the public image, and yes, the fashion. Big Hit had a styling team, a dedicated professional styling team whose job was to ensure that all 7 members looked like they belonged together. Cohesion was king. Harmony was everything. When BTS showed up to a music show, an award ceremony, a fan signing event, they needed to look like a unit. Not 7 solo artists who happened to be standing next to each other, but a team with a unified visual identity. And Taehyung's wildly individualistic, boundary-pushing fashion sense, it was a direct threat to that cohesion. The restrictions came down gradually but firmly. During official schedules, which let's be honest, was most of their waking hours, Taehyung was required to wear what the styling team selected. His personal pieces? Left in the dorm. His vintage finds stayed in the closet. That beret he loved? Only if the concept allowed it. That oversized coat that made him feel like a character in a Wong Kar-wai film? Not unless every other member was wearing something in the same visual universe. And this wasn't a one-time conversation. This was an ongoing, years-long negotiation between Taehyung's artistic soul and the machinery of K-pop image management. Bang Hyuk didn't implement these restrictions out of cruelty. He did it because he'd studied the industry with an almost academic obsession. He knew that the groups that lasted, the ones that became legends, were the ones that presented a unified front. Individuality was encouraged in music, in personality, in fan interactions, but visual presentation during official activities, that was non-negotiable. And it ate at Taehyung. You could see it if you paid attention. In early BTS content, 2013, 2014, 2015, there were moments where Taehyung would subtly adjust his outfit during behind-the-scenes footage. A collar popped up here, a sleeve rolled differently there, a piece of jewelry snuck in that wasn't part of the original styling plan. Small acts of rebellion, tiny declarations of, "I'm still here, I'm still me." The other members noticed it too. Jimin once mentioned in a casual interview that Taehyung had his own world when it came to fashion, and that the stylist sometimes had to literally negotiate with him about certain pieces. Suga, in his characteristically blunt way, commented during a Bangtan Bum that Taehyung could make even the most basic outfit look like it belonged in a magazine, which was a compliment,
and an acknowledgement that Taehyung's relationship with clothing was fundamentally different from everyone else's. But here's where the story gets deeper. Taehyung didn't just lose the ability to dress how he wanted. He felt like he was losing a part of his voice. In a 2019 interview, he spoke with that distant, thoughtful look he gets when he's being genuinely vulnerable about how fashion was his other language. He said that when he couldn't express himself through clothing, it felt like someone had taken away one of his senses. Not painful in an obvious way, but disorienting, like walking through a world with earplugs in. You can still function, but something essential is muffled. And that is what makes this band different from the others on this list. Jin's gaming band was about discipline. Jungkook's extreme sports band was about safety. But Taehyung's fashion restriction, that was about identity. That was about telling an artist the thing that makes you you. Tone it down. Save it for later. Right now, you need to be part of something bigger. The bittersweet redemption came slowly. As BTS grew, as they went from rookies performing in small venues to gods filling stadiums worldwide, the leash loosened. By the time they hit their Love Yourself era, Taehyung had earned enough creative capital to start influencing the group's styling direction. His personal fashion choices started bleeding into BTS's official looks. Suddenly, the group was experimenting with more eclectic, artistic, boundary-pushing visuals. And a lot of that was Taehyung's influence finally being allowed to breathe. The Gucci Boy era wasn't an accident. It was the result of years of a young man, quietly, patiently, sometimes painfully, waiting for the moment when the world was ready for his vision. And when that moment came, he didn't just walk through the door. He kicked it open wearing a vintage silk shirt, paint-stained trousers, and a look in his eyes that said, "I've been waiting for this my entire life." Bang Hyuk, to his credit, eventually recognized that Taehyung's unique aesthetic wasn't a threat to BTS's image. It was an asset. The very thing he tried to contain became one of the group's most powerful differentiators. Taehyung's fashion influence helped BTS stand apart from every other K-pop group on the planet. His individuality didn't break the cohesion. It leveled it. But that doesn't erase the years of quiet sacrifice. The mornings where Taehyung looked at his personal wardrobe, touched the fabrics he loved, and then put on whatever the styling team had laid out for him. The small deaths of self-expression that no one saw. The artist inside the idol, waiting, always waiting.
Number 4. RM, the simple bicycle ride that became a national security risk. A bicycle, that's it. That's the thing. A simple, two-wheeled, pedal-powered bicycle, the kind every kid in the world learns to ride before they're 10. And yet, for Kim Namjoon, the leader of the biggest boy band in human history, this humble machine became the center of one of the most quietly painful restrictions Bang Hyuk ever imposed. Let that sink in for a second. We're not talking about fast cars or private jets or some luxury hobby that costs thousands of dollars. We're talking about a bike. Namjoon's love for cycling wasn't a casual thing. It wasn't something he did once and posted about for aesthetic Instagram points. It was his lifeline, his therapy, his meditation, his church. If you've ever followed RM's social media, his old Twitter posts, his Instagram stories, his quiet photo dumps, you'd notice a pattern. Namjoon would disappear on his bicycle for hours, riding along the Han River, weaving through the back streets of Hanamdong, cruising past small independent bookshops in Mongwon, stopping at tiny cafes that most tourists would never find. He'd take photos of trees, of reflections in puddles, of old buildings with cracked walls that somehow looked beautiful through his eyes. And then he'd ride to whatever art gallery or museum had a new exhibition, lock up his bike outside, and spend an hour standing in front of a single painting, thinking, just thinking. This was Namjoon's version of freedom. And if you understand who RM is, truly, deeply understand, then you know why this mattered so much.
Kim Namjoon is by all accounts one of the most intellectually curious human beings in the K-pop industry. The man taught himself English by watching Friends. He reads philosophy books for fun. He references Nietzsche, Jung, and Murakami in his lyrics like other people reference the weather. His brain never stops. It's always running, always processing, always searching for meaning. And that kind of mind, it needs space. It needs room to wander, not just metaphorically, physically. Namjoon needed to move through the world at his own pace, with no schedule, no camera, no manager whispering in his ear about the next commitment. The bicycle gave him that. When he was riding, he wasn't RM, leader of BTS, responsible for 7 people's careers and millions of fans' emotions. He was just Namjoon, a 20-something guy in Seoul, riding a bike, feeling the wind, existing in the simplest possible way. And then BTS got famous, really famous. Not, oh, people recognize us at the airport famous. We're talking about if you walk down the street in Seoul, you will cause a riot famous. And that changed everything. The first incidents were small. A fan spotted Namjoon cycling near Itaewon and posted his location online. Within minutes, dozens of fans showed up. Then it happened again near the Han River and again near a bookshop in Yanmandong. Each time the crowd got bigger, each time the situation got harder to control, and each time the risk got more real. Because here's what people don't think about. Namjoon on a bicycle surrounded by a sudden crowd of excited fans in the middle of a busy Seoul street with cars, buses, and trucks passing by. That's not a cute fan encounter. That's a safety hazard. One startled swerve, one distracted driver, one moment of chaos where Namjoon loses balance because someone grabs his arm for a selfie, and you're looking at a headline that no one wants to read. Hyuk saw this coming before it happened. The man didn't build BTS from nothing by being naive. He understood crowd dynamics, he understood the psychology of fandom, and he understood that as BTS's fame grew exponentially, the window for Namjoon's solo bicycle rides was closing fast. So the restriction came. And it wasn't dramatic. There was no big confrontation, no shouting match. It was a quiet, firm conversation, the kind Bang PD was known for. Namjoon could no longer ride his bicycle freely through Seoul without security accompaniment. And during certain periods, world tours, comeback promotions, high-profile media schedules, solo cycling was essentially off the table entirely. Now, imagine how that conversation felt for Namjoon. Imagine being told that the one thing you do that requires absolutely nothing, no stage, no microphone, no audience, just you and a bike in the open road. Imagine being told you can't do that anymore. Not because you did anything wrong, but because you're too successful. Your own fame has become the cage. Namjoon talked about this in ways that were poetic and devastating at the same time. In his Mono mixtape, which if you haven't listened to it, stop reading this right now and go listen because it's a masterpiece of emotional vulnerability. There are themes of isolation, of longing for simplicity, of feeling trapped by the very life you worked so hard to build. Songs like Forever Rain and Tokyo carry this weight of a man who just wants to walk or ride through the world quietly, but can't. And the cruel irony, the bicycle rides were what made Namjoon the artist he is. Those solo excursions through Seoul weren't just exercise. They were research. They were inspiration. The quiet moments in art galleries became lyrics. The conversations overheard in small cafes became song concepts. The way sunlight hit the Han River at golden hour became the emotional texture of an entire album. When Bang PD restricted the cycling, he wasn't just taking away a hobby, he was cutting off one of Namjoon's most vital creative pipelines. And Namjoon knew it. He adapted, of course. He always does. That's what leaders do. They adapt. He started visiting galleries with security. He found indoor cycling alternatives. He shifted some of that wandering energy into a studio, into late-night writing sessions, and to virtual explorations of art and literature. But it wasn't the same. Anyone who's ever found peace in solitary movement, running, walking, or cycling, knows that the magic isn't just in the activity, it's in the solitude, it's in the unpredictability, it's in not knowing where you'll end up, what you'll see, who you'll accidentally observe. Add a security detail to that, and the magic evaporates. You're no longer a wanderer, you're a package being escorted. There's a moment in a Bangtanbom, an army, you know exactly which one I'm talking about, where Namjoon is looking out a car window at people cycling along a river path, and his expression just softens. It's barely a second of footage. Most people scroll right past it, but if you understand what cycling meant to him, that 1 second glance out the window tells an entire story. It's a man looking at the life he used to have, the simplicity he traded for greatness, the freedom he exchanged for a legacy. And you know what makes this even more painfully beautiful? Namjoon never complained, not publicly, not in any interview, not in any behind-the-scenes moment. He understood the logic, he understood the necessity, he understood that Bang Si-hyuk wasn't being cruel, he was being responsible. But understanding something intellectually and accepting it emotionally are two very different things. And somewhere inside the leader of BTS, there's still a boy from Ilsan who just wants to ride his bike along the river and think about the meaning of life without the entire world watching.
Number 3. J-Hope, the underground dance king whose street roots were declared dangerous. Before there was J-Hope, before there was the sunshine of BTS, before there was the guy who screamed, "I'm your hope, you're my hope," on stages in front of millions, there was Jungkook, a skinny, fiery, unbelievably talented kid from Gwangju who could move his body in ways that made grown adults stop in the middle of the street and stare. Hyuk wasn't just a dancer, he was a street dancer. And in South Korea's underground dance scene, that title carries a weight that most K-pop fans don't fully understand. We're talking about a subculture that existed in the basements and back alleys of Korean cities, raw, unpolished, aggressive, competitive. No fancy stages, no professional lighting, no choreography teams mapping out every move months in advance. Just a circle of bodies, a boombox, and whoever had the guts to step into the center and prove they were the best. And Hyuk, he didn't just step in, he dominated. Before he was even a teenager, Jungkook was already making a name for himself in Gwangju's underground dance community. He was part of a street dance crew called Neuron, and within that world, he was a legend in the making. Popping, locking, crumping, tutting, freestyle. His body could do things that seemed to defy the laws of physics. He won competitions, not small, local, here's a trophy and a pat on the back competitions, real battles, the kind where dancers from across the country showed up with murder in their eyes and moves that could break your confidence in half. And Hyuk, he beat them again and again and again. This wasn't a hobby for him. This was his blood. Street dance shaped everything about who Hyuk was, his confidence, his discipline, his artistic identity, his understanding of rhythm and musicality. When he walked into Big Hit Entertainment's audition, he didn't walk in as a kid who wanted to be an idol. He walked in as a dancer who happened to be exploring a new path. And that distinction matters because from the very first day he became a trainee, there was a tension, a quiet, simmering, never fully resolved tension between Hyuk the street dancer and J-Hope the idol. Bang Si-hyuk recognized Hyuk's talent immediately. You'd have to be blind not to. The way this kid moved was on another level entirely. But Bang PD also recognized something else. Hyuk's deep, almost spiritual connection to street dance culture was a potential problem for the group he was building. Here's why. The K-pop idol system is built on control, synchronized choreography, unified formations, every member hitting the same move at the exact microsecond. The beauty of K-pop dance isn't individuality, it's uniformity. It's 7 bodies moving as one. And street dance? Street dance is the opposite of that. Street dance is about breaking rules. It's about personal expression. It's about the moment when the beat drops and your body does something that even you didn't plan. It's chaotic, it's unpredictable, and it's deeply, fundamentally individual. And that individuality, that raw, untamed energy that made Hyuk a god on the underground circuit, was exactly what Bang Si-hyuk needed to suppress. Not destroy, suppress, channel, redirect. The restrictions rolled out in phases. First, Hyuk was told to limit his participation in underground dance battles and street dance events. This wasn't a casual suggestion, it was a directive with real consequences. Big Hit's management explained the reasoning clearly. If J-Hope was seen competing in underground dance circles, it would create a brand conflict. BTS was being positioned as a hip-hop idol group, yes, but an idol group nonetheless. And in the rigid hierarchy of Korean entertainment, there was a hard line between the idol world and the underground scene. Underground culture in South Korea, dance, rap, music, carried associations that didn't align with the clean, marketable, fan-friendly image that BTS needed to project in their early years. The underground scene was raw, sometimes controversial, and fiercely independent. It attracted artists who explicitly rejected the idol system. For J-Hope to be visibly active in that world while simultaneously being the dance pillar of a K-pop group, that was a contradiction that could confuse BTS's branding, alienate potential mainstream fans, and, here's the big one, give ammunition to the many critics who were already calling BTS fake hip-hop idols trying to co-opt street culture without really belonging to it. That criticism stung, and it was everywhere in 2013 and 2014. Underground rappers and dancers openly mocked idol groups that used hip-hop and street aesthetics. If J-Hope had been caught competing in dance battles while promoting as an idol, it would have been a PR nightmare. Not because he wasn't talented enough, he was more than talented enough, but because the optics would have fueled the exact narrative that BTS's enemies wanted to push. So, Hyuk pulled back. Slowly, painfully, he disconnected from the world that had raised him. The underground circles that once celebrated him noticed his absence. The crews he used to run with moved on. The battles continued without him. And every time Hyuk saw a clip of street dance competition online, the crowd screaming, the dancers freestyling with that raw, primal energy, a part of him ached, because that was supposed to be him. That was him once. The members saw it. Jimin, who shared a room with Hyuk for years, has spoken about how Hyuk would sometimes dance alone in their dorm room late at night. Not BTS choreography, not the polished, synchronized routines they'd rehearse for 12 hours a day. Street dance, raw, unstructured, emotional movement that looked like a conversation between Hyuk's body and his memories. Jimin said he would just watch silently, knowing that this was Hyuk's way of keeping that part of him alive, the part that Big Hit needed him to hide. And here's the heartbreaking irony that makes this whole thing so much more complex. The very skills that made Hyuk dangerous in the underground were the same skills that made J-Hope indispensable to BTS. His precision, his musicality, his ability to learn and teach choreography at inhuman speed, his capacity to feel music in his bones and translate it into movement, all of that came from street dance. Bang PD essentially took the product of street culture, refined it, repackaged it, and sold it as K-pop excellence, while simultaneously telling Hyuk he couldn't go back to the source. He was asked to be the tree while being cut off from his roots. But Hyuk, in that incredible way of his, found a middle ground. He couldn't battle in underground circles, but he could infuse every BTS performance with the spirit of street dance. Watch any BTS dance practice video closely. Watch J-Hope specifically. While the other members hit the choreography cleanly and precisely, J-Hope adds something extra, a slightly different angle on a pop, a smoother transition, a moment of freestyle that lasts barely half a second but carries the DNA of 1,000 underground battles. That's not just technique, that's rebellion. Tiny, beautiful, almost invisible acts of rebellion embedded in the choreography of the world's biggest pop group. And Bang PD? Over the years, he came to appreciate what he'd almost stamped out. J-Hope's street dance heritage became a selling point. His Hope World mixtape was soaked in the aesthetics of street and underground culture. His solo stages during concerts became legendary showcases of freestyle ability. The very thing that was once considered a threat to BTS's image eventually became one of its most celebrated features. But let's not romanticize the journey. The years of suppression left marks. Hyuk once said, in a moment of rare vulnerability during a festive dinner, that there were times he didn't know who he was anymore, whether he was the street dancer from Gwangju or the idol from Big Hit.
That identity crisis, that constant negotiation between who he was and who he was told to be, that's the price of the band. A price that doesn't show up in concert ticket sales or Billboard charts, but lives quietly in the heart of a man who was once the king of the underground and had to give up his crown to wear a different one.
Number 2, Sugar, the midnight studio obsession that was slowly destroying him. There's a room in the Big Hit building that most fans know by name, but have never seen in full. They call it the Genius Lab, and for Min Yoongi, Sugar, August D, whatever name you want to use for a man who contains multitudes, that room wasn't just a studio, it was a sanctuary, a temple, a place where the noise of the world couldn't reach him, and the only voice that mattered was the one inside his head, whispering melodies at 3 in the morning. Yoongi's love for producing music isn't something you can describe with normal words like passion or dedication. Those words are too small for what this man felt. Producing wasn't Yoongi's favorite hobby. It wasn't even his favorite part of being in BTS. It was his reason for breathing. Before BTS, before Big Hit, before the fame and the awards and the sold-out stadiums, Yoongi was a broke kid in Daegu making beats on a cheap keyboard in a tiny room, dreaming of a life where music was all that mattered. He worked part-time jobs to buy equipment. He skipped meals to afford studio time. He literally chose music over food. That's not passion, that's possession. And when he finally made it into Big Hit as a trainee and then as a member of BTS, you'd think that dream had been fulfilled. But here's the thing about Min Yoongi. He doesn't have an off switch. Success didn't satisfy him. Debut didn't satisfy him. Billboard #1s didn't satisfy him. Nothing satisfied him except the next beat, the next melody, the next lyric that perfectly captured a feeling he couldn't express any other way. And so every night, every single night, after BTS's scheduled activities were done, after the rehearsals and the recordings and the variety show filmings and the fan events, Yoongi would disappear. Not to the dorm, not to rest, not to eat a proper meal and take care of his body like a normal human being. He went to the Genius Lab, and he wouldn't come out until dawn, sometimes not even then. The other members talked about this in ways that started as jokes, but gradually became something heavier. Jin would say, Yoongi Hyung lives in his studio, not the dorm. Jungkook would mention casually that he'd gone to bed at midnight and woken up at 7, and Yoongi's studio light was still on, meaning the man hadn't slept at all. RM, who understood the creative obsession better than most, would check on Yoongi and find him hunched over his equipment, eyes red-hot, surrounded by empty coffee cups and untouched food containers that someone had left at his door hours ago. This wasn't romantic. This wasn't the tortured artist aesthetic that people glorify on social media. This was a man slowly, methodically, almost deliberately breaking himself in the name of his art, and his body was keeping score. Yoongi's health issues are well documented, and while not all of them can be attributed solely to his studio habits, the connection is impossible to ignore. His chronic shoulder injury, the one that eventually required surgery in 2020, was aggravated by years of sitting in the same position for 12, 14, 16 hours straight, hunched over a keyboard and mixing board. His back problems, his joint pain, the recurring exhaustion that would hit him so hard during promotions that sometimes he'd look like a ghost on stage. All of it traced back to a lifestyle where sleep was optional and self-care was an afterthought. And then there was the mental health dimension. Yoongi has been more open than almost any K-pop idol in history about his struggles with depression and anxiety. In his August D mixtapes, he laid his soul bare. Lyrics about wanting to die, about feeling trapped, about the darkness that lived inside him like a permanent resident. And while music was his therapy, his way of processing those feelings, the manner in which he pursued it was making things worse. Because there's a difference between using music as healing and using music as avoidance. And Yoongi, in those late-night sessions, was doing both. He was creating masterpieces and running from sleep, because sleep meant dreams, and dreams meant facing things he wasn't ready to face. The studio was his medicine and his poison, and it was getting harder and harder to tell which was which.
Bang Si-hyuk saw the deterioration happening in real time, and this is where you have to give the man credit. Even his harshest critics would admit that when it came to his artist's health, Bang PD took it seriously. Not perfectly, not always quickly enough, but seriously. The conversations between Bang PD and Yoongi about studio time weren't casual chats, they were interventions. Multiple sources within the big hit ecosystem have described a pattern. Bang PD would sit Yoongi down, look at the data, his schedule, his sleep hours, his physical condition reports from the company's medical team, and lay it out plainly. You cannot keep doing this. And Yoongi, stubborn as granite, would push back. Not with anger. Yoongi's not the explosive type. With logic. He'd argue that his best work came at night, that the studio was where he was most productive, that if he stopped, the music would stop, and if the music stopped, then what was the point of any of it? Those conversations must have been something to witness. Two brilliant, stubborn minds going back and forth, one trying to protect an artist from himself, the other trying to protect his art from the world. But Bang PD held firm. The restrictions were implemented. Yoongi was given studio curfews during comeback preparation periods. After certain hours, his studio access was limited. During tour rehearsal phases, he was expected, not asked, expected to be in the dorm by a set time, resting. The company even brought in health professionals who worked with Yoongi on creating a more sustainable creative routine, one that didn't require sacrificing his body on the altar of perfectionism. And Yoongi hated it. Not openly, not dramatically, that's not his style, but in the quiet ways that Yoongi communicates his truest feelings, in lyrics that talked about cages and chains, in V-Live sessions where he'd mention almost too casually that he wasn't allowed to stay in the studio as late as he wanted, in the way he'd look at his studio door when being pulled away from mandatory rest with an expression that wasn't just reluctance, it was grief. Because every hour he wasn't producing was an hour where a melody might be lost, a lyric might fade, an idea might evaporate into the air and never to return. For someone like Yoongi, who believed that every song was a living thing that existed for a brief window before disappearing, being told to stop was like being told to let something beautiful die. But here's what Yoongi couldn't see in those moments, and what Bang PD could. A dead artist makes no music at all. A hospitalized producer completes no albums. A man who destroys his body at 25 doesn't get a career at 35. The band wasn't about controlling Yoongi's creativity. It was about making sure Min Yoongi would survive long enough to create everything he was meant to create. And the proof? Look at what came after the band. Look at the August D trilogy. Look at Daechitwa. Look at Hagum. Look at the solo album that debuted at number 2 on the Billboard 200. All of that came from a Yoongi who was still passionate, still obsessive, still a midnight creature at heart, but one who had been forced, against his will, to take care of the vessel that carried his genius. The shoulder surgery in 2020 was almost a metaphor. They literally had to cut him open and fix the physical damage that years of unsustainable studio habits had caused. And when he came back, when he sat in that studio chair again with a repaired shoulder and a body that had been given the rest it desperately needed, he made the best music of his career. Not despite the band, because of it. Bang Si-hyuk saved Yoongi from music. He saved Yoongi from himself. And that might be the most important thing the man ever did.
Number 1, Jimin, the starvation obsession that nearly shattered BTS from the inside. This is it, the final entry, the one I told you would change everything. And I need you to really, truly listen to this one. Not just as a fan, not just as someone watching a top list for entertainment, but as a human being. Because this story isn't just about K-pop, it's about something that millions of people around the world silently battle every single day. And the fact that it happened to someone as beloved, as talented, as seemingly perfect as Park Jimin makes it all the more devastating. Jimin's favorite thing, the thing that Bang Si-hyuk had to rip away from him with both hands, was his own diet. Or more accurately, his obsessive, relentless, self-destructive pursuit of what he believed was the perfect body through extreme food restriction. And when I say extreme, I don't mean, oh, he cut out carbs for a week. I mean, Park Jimin, one of the most gifted dancers and vocalists of his generation, would go days without eating a full meal. Days. Sometimes he'd survive on nothing but a single piece of bread and water for 24 hours, sometimes not even that. During the darkest period, which multiple sources, including the members themselves, have placed around the Wings and Blood, Sweat and Tears era in 2016, Jimin was eating 1 meal a day, and meal is a generous word for what he was consuming. We're talking about amounts of food so small that a child would find them insufficient. And he was doing this while simultaneously rehearsing complex choreography for 8 to 10 hours a day, performing on stage under blinding lights, traveling across countries for promotions, and maintaining the kind of schedule that would exhaust a professional athlete eating 3 full meals with supplements. Jimin wasn't just dieting, he was starving himself. And the reason that makes this so profoundly heartbreaking was that he believed, genuinely and completely believed, that he was fat. Park Jimin, the man with a jawline that could cut glass, the man whose contemporary dance skills required a body so lean and controlled that professional dancers watched him in awe, the man who was voted one of the most attractive faces in the world by multiple international publications. That man looked in the mirror and saw someone who wasn't good enough. This didn't come from nowhere. South Korea's beauty standards are among the most brutal in the world. The K-pop industry, in particular, operates on a visual standard that is almost inhumane in its strictness. Male idols are expected to have sharp jawlines, visible collarbones, slim waists, and the kind of lean physique that looks effortless but requires constant, painful maintenance. And among BTS's 7 members, Jimin was the one who internalized these standards the most deeply. He's spoken about it in rare, vulnerable moments during festa dinners, in passing comments during interviews, in the subtext of his lyrics. He talked about looking at himself after performances and focusing not on his incredible dancing, not on his flawless vocals, but on whether his cheeks looked too round, whether his thighs looked too thick, whether his body met the impossible standard he constructed in his own mind. And so he stopped eating. Not all at once, gradually, insidiously. A skipped breakfast here, and I already ate lie there. Smaller portions, fewer calories, more exercise to compensate for whatever tiny amount he did consume. It was a spiral, and by the time anyone noticed how deep he'd gone, Jimin was already in dangerous territory. The members noticed first. Of course they did. These 7 men lived together, breathed together, spent virtually every waking moment in each other's company. You can't hide a collapsing body from people who see you shirtless in a shared dorm room. Jungkook noticed that Jimin's energy during dance practice was dropping. Where Jimin used to be the last one standing, the one who'd practice a move 50 extra times until it was perfect, he was now getting winded faster. His movements, usually so sharp and explosive, had a slight lag. Taehyung, Jimin's best friend, his soulmate, the person who knew him better than arguably anyone on the planet, noticed the emotional changes. Jimin was more irritable, more withdrawn. He'd snap at small things and then immediately apologize with tears in his eyes. That's what malnutrition does to the brain. It doesn't just weaken the body, it destabilizes the mind. Emotions become volatile, thoughts become darker, the world gets smaller and scarier. And Jin, the eldest Hung, the one who expressed love through food, who was constantly cooking for the members, who believed that a good meal could fix almost anything, Jin watched Jimin push away plate after plate with excuses that got thinner as fast as his body did. Jin later admitted in an emotional moment that he would deliberately cook Jimin's favorite dishes and practically beg him to eat. Sometimes Jimin would take a few bites to make Jin stop worrying. Sometimes he wouldn't even do that. It was RM that brought it to Bang Si-hyuk's attention. As the leader, Namjoon carried the weight of the group's well-being on his shoulders, and watching Jimin deteriorate was crushing him. He couldn't fix it alone. The members had tried, gently, then firmly, then desperately, to get Jimin to eat normally. But Jimin's disorder had its own logic, its own voice, and it was louder than any amount of love from his brothers. Bang Si-hyuk's response was immediate and uncompromising, and this is the moment where the narrative about Bang PD as a cold, calculating businessman falls apart completely.
Because what he did wasn't a business decision, it was a human decision. He sat Jimin down, some accounts say multiple times, and told him that the extreme dieting was over. Not reduced, not modified, over. He brought in nutritionists, professional ones, people who understood eating disorders, who understood the psychology behind them, who could build meal plans that would keep Jimin healthy without triggering the body dysmorphia that was driving the starvation. He mandated that Jimin eat supervised meals during comeback periods. Supervised, meaning someone from the company's health team would actually watch to make sure Jimin consumed adequate nutrition. He made it clear, and this is the part that reportedly brought Jimin to tears, that no performance, no concept, no visual aesthetic was worth destroying his health. He told Jimin, in what must have been one of the most pivotal conversations of both of their lives, that BTS needed Park Jimin alive and well more than they needed Park Jimin thin. And Jimin broke, not in a dramatic, cinematic way, in the quiet, devastating way that real emotional breakthroughs happen. He cried, he resisted, he struggled. Recovery from disordered eating isn't a straight line, it's a war with daily battles, and Jimin fought that war in the most public spotlight imaginable. There were relapses, there were moments during later eras where fans noticed Jimin's weight fluctuating and worried. There were interviews where Jimin would unconsciously touch his stomach or adjust his shirt in ways that revealed the insecurity was still there, still whispering. But the band held. The nutritional support system stayed in place. The members, empowered by Bang PD's intervention, became Jimin's daily guardians. Taehyung would casually share food with Jimin on camera, making it look natural, making it look like just two best friends eating together, but knowing in his heart that every bite Jimin took was a small victory. Jungkook would suggest group meals after practice, always making sure Jimin was included, always making sure there were dishes Jimin enjoyed. Jin kept cooking, always offering, never giving up. And Jimin, beautiful, brave, broken and rebuilding Park Jimin, slowly, painfully, courageously learned to feed himself again. Not perfectly, not without setbacks, but enough. Enough to keep dancing, enough to keep singing, enough to keep being the artist that made millions of people feel less alone in the world. When Jimin performed Lie during the Wings tour, a song literally about being trapped in a cycle of self-deception, and his body moved with that supernatural grace that only Jimin possesses, every single person in that arena was watching a miracle. Not a musical miracle, a survival miracle. That body, the one creating art in real time, was the same body that its owner had tried to erase through starvation. And it was still there, still moving, still breathing, still alive. Because Bang PD said no, because 6 brothers refused to look away, because somewhere inside Park Jimin, beneath the dysmorphia and the impossible standards and the voice that told him he wasn't enough, there was another voice, quieter but stronger. A voice that said, you deserve to eat, you deserve to live, you deserve to take up space in this world. And that, Army, that is why number 1 isn't just a story about a band favorite thing. It's a story about a life that was saved. Not by music, not by fame, not by awards, by the simple, radical, earth-shaking act of someone saying, I see what you're doing to yourself, and I won't let you. That's the list. Top 7 reasons why BTS's members' favorite things were strictly banned by Bang Hyuk. 7 stories, 7 sacrifices, 7 reminders that behind every perfect performance, there's a human being who gave up something precious to stand on that stage. Remember that the next time you press play.
And there you have it, ladies and gentlemen, the full countdown. Top 7 reasons why BTS's members' favorite things were strictly banned by Bang Hyuk. From Jin's gaming controller being pried from his hands to Jungkook's adrenaline wings being clipped. From Taehyung's artistic identity being muted in matching outfits to Namjoon's bicycle freedom vanishing into the chaos of fame. From J-Hope's underground dance crown being locked away to Suga's midnight genius nearly burning him alive from the inside. And finally, Jimin, the boy who tried to disappear and the man who refused to let him. 7 members, 7 passions, 7 sacrifices that the world never fully saw, and one man, Hyuk, who made decisions that were painful, controversial, sometimes heartbreaking, but ultimately built the foundation for the most successful musical act of the 21st century. Now, here's the question nobody wants to ask, but everybody should be thinking about. Was it worth it? Were the bands justified? Did the sacrifices create BTS, or did they simply cost BTS something that can never be measured in album sales and Billboard records? Because the truth, the real truth, is that it's both. Every single restriction on this list took something personal, something sacred, something irreplaceable from a young man who was just trying to hold on to a piece of himself inside a machine that demanded everything. And every single restriction on this list also contributed to forging the discipline, the resilience, the unbreakable bond that turned 7 ordinary boys into global legends. That's not a comfortable conclusion. It's not clean. It's not wrapped in a bow. But that's the K-pop industry. That's the entertainment world. That's the price of standing where BTS stands today, on top of the world, with scars that nobody sees under the stage lights. So the next time you stream a BTS song, the next time you watch a performance that leaves you breathless, the next time you see Jimin dance like gravity doesn't apply to him, or hear Suga's production and wonder how a human brain can create something that beautiful, remember this list. Remember what was given up. Remember that greatness isn't free. It never was. And remember that behind every icon, there's a person, a real, breathing, imperfect, beautiful person who loved something simple. A game, a bike ride, a late night in the studio, a meal they were afraid to eat, and let it go so that you could have the music that changed your life. That's BTS. That's the story behind the story. And now you know. If this hit you as hard as it hit me, drop a comment and tell me which member's story shocked you the most. Which band do you think was the hardest to accept? And do you think Hyuk made the right call? Let's talk about it, because stories like these, they deserve to be talked about. Until next time, stay curious, stay kind, and never forget, every spotlight casts a shadow. Peace.